this could happen. Those who fought alongside us are wondering if their sacrifices were for naught and the alliances were for naught. The world is wondering, how did this happen? And in the words of my speaker, Pierre Poilievre, Canada will have to wear this forever, forever. But we have an opportunity here today. We have an opportunity and we have an obligation. Mr. Chair, the horrible thing has happened and we can't change what happened. We can't even change it, even if we want to change it, but we can't change it. But we have an opportunity and an obligation that, by God, this never, ever happens again, never, ever. And I encourage every single member of this committee to consider what it means to deny this opportunity to Canadians, to Holocaust survivors, and to the world to find out what happened. And I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear that the speaker should be on the list, because guess what? We can add the speaker to the list. We can amend the list of agencies I put forward to add the speaker to the list. I have no problem at all. I would actually be very interested to hear from the former speaker as to what vetting processes he and his staff went through for this tragedy to occur. I'm hearing excuses like it should go through the House Procedures Committee. The House Procedures Committee is currently seized with foreign interference as a result of the House of Commons asking to look into it. They are seized with that right now. Government operations has the flexibility, has the ability to be nimble, to look at any issue when it is pressing immediately, to turn our resources, our energies, and our efforts to do that. And we should do so in this case. In this case, which has brought embarrassment not only to the nation, but to Canada, throughout the entire world. So I don't want to hear excuses. I'm asking everyone here today, we have an opportunity to begin to move forward, to start the healing, and we can make that choice. Every single one of us on this committee can make this choice today to start that healing process, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I'll read my motion into the record, please. Given the international embarrassment created by the Liberal government by allowing a former soldier of a Nazi military unit in World War II to attend and be recognized with an ovation during the President of Ukraine's special address to Parliament on Friday, September 22nd, and that proper vetting was neither done nor was completed, and this individual's military record was ignored, the committee dedicates 6 meetings holding hearing into this matter, and the committee hear from the following witnesses: the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development Diplomatic Protocol, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Parliamentary Protective Service, the House of Commons Sergeant at Arms, the House of Commons International and Interparliamentary Affairs, the Privy Council Office, and the Prime Minister's Office. So, Mr. Chair, I will leave my motion there. The world is watching. We have the opportunity today, every single one of us on this committee, to make the choice to start the healing process and find out exactly, precisely what happened so that it never, ever happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cusi. I'll start a list. I have Ms. Vignola, then Mr. Genuas. Ms. Vignola.
I will have to speak again later. What happened Friday was outrageous. I agree. We should never have been invited to stand in those circumstances. It's important to understand what happened and exactly how this person was invited to enter the chamber and how we can avoid a similar situation in the future. Nobody in the House would have stood to applaud a Nazi or a former Nazi. Nobody would have stood for this person. This individual should never have been invited into the house and should not have been honored in the way that he was honored. Despite what my colleague says, however, it's not an excuse to say House procedure has to validate House procedure. Of course, the House has to examine its own way of working and its own protocols. When it comes to our committee, we have to look at our schedule. We have 7 or 8 studies that are still unfinished, and I don't believe we should set those aside. Now, my suggestion, and we can discuss this, I would suggest that we set aside the debate and perhaps ask the chair to send a letter to PROC to study this motion. Now, it's not up to me to say no and to sweep it aside. I think it should be studied, but it should be studied in the right committee, at the right committee, rather.
So I'm not sure if it's the translation. The clerk is asking, are you moving a motion to adjourn this motion? To adjourn this motion? Okay. Is that what you got? Okay.
Those are two separate things, though. A motion
Yes.
to adjourn debate.
Yes. And then we can back.
She was speaking, and if she had while she had the floor said she moved it, but she didn't say while she had the floor that she moved it, and she can get the floor again and move it at that point. But I have the floor first.
No, I was asking, I understood what Ms. Vignola said. Clerk looked over to me to ask if we were adjourning it. I asked to clarify it because of the translation. And so I'm asking if it was a motion to adjourn this debate. And
Just point of order, Chair. I think the member, I was learning the translation as well. I think what the member said was that we should send a letter to PROC, which would be a different,
Yeah.
different substantive motion. Again, a member, if the member has the floor, has a right to move a motion to adjourn debate. But if a member says that we should send a letter and then cedes the floor, I would very much like to speak to this motion, and someone can get on the list after me and move adjournment to debate. But I do think we should have an opportunity to have some discussion of this. But in any event, I don't think the member moved the motion while she had the floor. She said we should send a letter, which is a different matter. That's on a point of order.
Ms. Vignola, quickly, then I will discuss this.
Alors, j'ai proposé, je vais redire les mêmes mots. J'ai proposé
I will repeat what I said. I propose that we adjourn this debate to think about asking the chair to send a letter to send the motion to PROC. So I moved that we adjourn the debate. First and foremost, I am moving a motion to adjourn the debate.
Just on the point of order, Chair, the member had to say it while she had the floor. And I don't think she has the floor anymore.
Yeah, just the way it was said, and I understand the intent, and normally we would just vote on the intent because of the way the committee has operated. The condition, putting condition on it brings up for debate. Why don't we hear from Mr. Genues, then we can go back to Mrs. Vignola and she can clarify what you want, unless Mr. Johns, you wanted to chime in as well after Mr. Genues?
You're the chair.
I'm asking you. So Mr. Genues, then Mrs. Vignola, then yourself.
Yes, just leave it like
Okay.
that.
Why don't you have your say, Mr. Genues, and then we can go back to Mrs. Vignola. And then Mr. Kusmirchuk after Mr. John.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. And I obviously the majority of the committee will have its will, but I hope that we have an opportunity to at least have some discussion here today, because I think there's there's a lot of important points that need to be aired on this. So I wanted to just start by sharing a little bit of personal context, and that is I haven't spoken on this issue yet, but it's personal for me. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and I share in the shock about what happened on Friday. I personally wasn't here when it happened, so I only found out about it afterwards. And so for me, growing up, knowing about the Holocaust and World War II was obviously really important. It was a part of my family's history as well as world history. And my parents always emphasized the importance of knowing about history, of how learning about history is how we avoid repeating it, how we learn from the mistakes of history, and how it's especially important for us to learn about these darker moments in our collective history, so that we can prevent these grave evils from repeating themselves. And the promise that was made to my grandmother's generation, the promise of never again, of not allowing genocides to happen in the future, is one that we have obviously failed to deliver on. We have rising anti-Semitism around the world, including here in Canada. And by my count, there have been 4 instances in the time I've been a member of Parliament where this House has recognized contemporaneous acts of genocide. So we know genocide continues. And this, again, just underlines the importance of knowing world history, of knowing our history, and having that inform the decisions that our institutions make. And one of the things about this that's so shocking to me is that we have a whole apparatus of government that is responsible for security, for protocol, for ensuring the success of these visits. And for any of the people involved in this process, it should just not have passed the basic smell test, like the basic description of who this individual was, someone who fought against Russia during the Second World War. That should not have passed a basic smell test. That should have led to any number of the people in the RCMP protocol, the Prime Minister's office, all those that were involved in this visits to ask more questions about it. And there's a whole painful history in this country of conflict around people who came to Canada, who had been members of the Waffen SS, and so for people to not have known that history, and I think we need to underline that the Prime Minister is ultimately responsible for this apparatus. The RCMP, the House of Commons Security reports to the RCMP. There are this is and this is, I think this is important from a process perspective, because I understand that some members want to say this isn't a government operations issue. This is a procedure and House affairs issue. And I agree with my colleague who said, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee is already seized with the issue of foreign interference, and pushing this over to Procedure and House Affairs is a way of, I think, frankly, trying to bury the discussion of it. But moreover, this isn't just a question of procedure and House activities. This is a question of the operations of government, and as such, we need to be looking at the Operations Committee, and it suits the framing of some members who want to avoid looking at the responsibility of the government and government operations for this outcome by saying, no, it's just the House of Commons. But this was a state visit. The House of Commons is used for these kinds of addresses, but formally speaking, the House of Commons isn't sitting. We have people on the floor that are not members of Parliament. We understand this, that formally speaking, the House doesn't sit. We have a foreign leader addressing the House within the House of Commons. But this very much, I think, raises important questions of government operations. How did this happen from a government operations perspective? So when members say, let's put it over as a procedure and House issue, it's not a procedure and House issue fundamentally. It is more fundamentally a government operations issue, and we need to be able to ask those government operations questions, which I think includes looking at how there was such historical ignorance within the processes that were ultimately, I think, responsible to the Prime Minister and the government. Such ignorance of the debates that have happened in Canada around the Waffen-SS and of the history of the Holocaust itself. Chair, the sad thing is that we're living through a time when the term Nazi is regularly thrown around as a political insult, apparently by people who don't seem to have a basic understanding and recollection of the history of Nazism. This is deeply troubling, and it contributes, I think, to the concern about what happened last Friday. I wanted to put on the record as well, it's important to underline what we're talking about in terms of the Waffen-SS. Some articles have referred to the person who was in the house as being someone who fought for or fought alongside Nazi Germany, and this grossly understates the full picture. The SS was the paramilitary unit of the Nazi Party, personally loyal to Hitler. The SS was not just a unit within the German army. It was a paramilitary organization of the Nazi Party, personally loyal to Hitler. It was deployed in all kinds of the most horrific, unimaginable atrocities. And it was used as a personal vehicle for exercising power. It was there in part so that if there was agitation against the regime from within the army, that the SS could be deployed that was personally loyal to the Nazi Party and to Hitler. This is of course historically important because we knew as a result of the Valkyrie plot that there was agitation within the German military. The SS was deeply evil and was responsible for some of the most horrific atrocities in human history. And this is the case of an individual who voluntarily enlisted with the SS in 1943. Again, chose to enlist with the SS in 1943. And my colleague referenced the Nuremberg trials, and I just want to share a number of quotes from the Nuremberg trials to understand what we're talking about here. It is impossible to single out any portion of the SS which was not involved in these criminal activities. The tribunal finds that knowledge of these criminal activities was sufficiently general to justify declaring that the SS was a criminal organization to the extent hereinafter described. Going on, there is evidence that the shooting of unarmed prisoners of war was the general practice in some Waffen-SS divisions. Units of the Waffen-SS and Einsatzgruppe operating directly under the SS main office were used to carry out these plans. These units were also involved in the widespread murder and ill treatment of the civilian population of occupied territories under the guise of combating partisan units. Units of the SS exterminated Jews and people deemed politically undesirable by the SS, and their reports record the execution of enormous numbers of persons. Waffen-SS divisions were responsible for many massacres and atrocities in occupied territories, such as the massacres at Oradour and Ladice. So, Chair, again, we have a situation in which the term Nazi is increasingly thrown around as a political insult on Twitter and social media and other places, even by political leaders. But we have, I think, a declining understanding of what of the horrors of this period, of the roots and causes of this totalitarian evil, and I would commend to all members of the public just the importance of understanding history and understanding this period in particular as we commit ourselves to the principle of never again. And as the Government Operations Committee, we need to understand what happened as a matter of government operations. If members want to make the case that the Prime Minister is not responsible or that that government operations are not associated with what happened, then they can make that case. But let's not bury it. Let's not hide it. Let's not pretend that there aren't operations of government questions that need to be asked and considered. Now is not the time for excuses or punting it to other committees. Government operations is the place to do it, and it's because it's a government operations issue as well as because of the issues that are already on the table at Procedure and House Affairs. So I hope that members will consider this reality and take a stand for remembering and learning from history, getting to the bottom of what happened, and holding powerful people accountable for this grave stain on our national reputation. Thank you.
Thanks. Before you start, Mrs. Vignola, just we are still speaking actually on your amendment, which is to adjourn and write the letter asking PROC to do it. And that will continue until there is no one else on the speaking list. So I'm not sure if Mr. Johns and Mr. Irick wish to speak on that still, which is to adjourn and write the letter to PROC. But it was
Clarification?
Yeah.
Clarification only. I think we're speaking on the motion to adjourn first. No, they're together, grouped in. It's one. Okay, well, if it's a motion to adjourn, then it goes to a vote.
Letter, which is debatable. This is the direction from the clerk I'm receiving.
I can clarify on a point of order, Chair, if that's helpful.
Unless we have consent to have Ms. Vignola withdraw that amendment.
Letter?
But because it was adjourn, write the letter and adjourn, that becomes it not just the straight adjournment, which would force us to go straight to a vote on it.
Donc, la motion que j'ai demandé.
The motion that I wanted to move was to adjourn the debate, to think about the idea. I didn't say that in the motion there should be a proposal to write a letter. It was to reflect on this idea of sending this elsewhere. I wanted a motion to adjourn the debate, period. So if it's considered that my motion was to think about sending this to PROC, then I would like to withdraw it. Please don't put words in my mouth. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, we require UC from the committee to withdraw that. I assume we have that, colleagues? Withdraw the whole thing. Just withdraw the whole thing. Fine.
I'm sorry, to clarify, to withdraw the whole, what's the whole thing?
Adjourn the debate on your motion
Okay.
and write the letter.
Okay.
So
is it
we
to
have
null that?
UC
Or excuse me,
withdrawn
withdraw
that.
Pardon me.
We've-
Okay, yeah, sure,
right.
that's fine.
Now, Ms. Vignola, you have the floor again. Could you put up your hand? And then we can get to Mr. Johns. Mr. Kazmierczak, looks like you've not even put down your hand. Go ahead, Ms. Vignola.
Étant donné qu'on a retiré la.
Since we have withdrawn this pseudo motion with two elements, I would like to now table a motion to adjourn the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. And I realize that was the original intent, but procedure being procedure, we had to follow that. So thank you. So we'll just go to a quick vote for adjourning the debate on the motion, on Ms. Kusi's motion. Do a recorded division.
Mr. Juari,
Support.
Ms. Ackman,
In favor?
Mr. Baines.
In favor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kuzmierczak,
Support.
Mr. Souza,
In favor.
Ms. Block,
No.
Mr. Janice,
No.
Ms. Kuzi,
Opposed.
Madame Vignola,
Pour.
Mr. Johns.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your patience,
Three nays.
colleagues. So that motion is adjourned. Mr. Johns, so we'll start a new speaking.
Okay, I
order
want to
with
move
Mr.
that,
Johns.
just to follow up.
Sorry, 2 seconds. Mr. Johns, did you have your hand up? Okay,
I just said shame.
okay, that's fair.
That's
Mr. Johns?
We all want the same thing here. We want accountability for what happened and to make sure it never happens again. This is important to every member at this committee. It's absolutely critical. And I think Ms. Vignola was going on that thread. Absolutely. What we want to do is make sure that this goes in the right place. And PROC, you know, it's really clear in terms of their mandate that the Procedure and House Affairs Committee
Point
studies
of
and
order,
reports.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Block, go ahead. Sorry, Mr. Johns.
Thank you very much. Just a point of clarification. If a motion to adjourn the debate passed, is it your intention that we continue on with the debate as it appears Mr. Johns is doing?
No, the motion is adjourned. We open up floor for speaking order. My assumption is that we were going to go to motions, but Mr. Johns is addressing something else, perhaps following up on Ms. Vignola's suggestion that we write to PROC about this, if I'm guessing right, but I'll let Mr. Johns continue.
Absolutely. That's exactly where I want to go in support of the spirit of what Ms. Kuzi's brought here today, what this committee wants, everybody wants. And that's to make sure that this is looked at and that it's done properly, that there's accountability. We find out what happened, what went wrong, where the gaps are, and to fix it so it never, ever happens again. And we need to make sure it lands at PROC to ensure that that is the role of PROC. The whole role of PROC is to ensure that the internal administration of the House and services and facilities for MPs is run with proper rules and practices that protect the House and the members, so that something like this, something terrible like this and shameful like this never happens again. So I move that we write a letter to PROC asking them to do a study on this, and that they I don't think we should tell PROC who.
We'll write, the chair will.
I don't think we should determine to PROC who they should invite and how many meetings they should have, but that we want this to be their top priority in terms of, you know, we know they're undergoing a lot of really difficult studies, and it is a challenging job. As much as this committee, we have 8 studies going here as well. I want to make sure that we get this to PROC and that we write in the letter that this is an absolute priority of this committee, that we ask PROC to take this on and they study this urgently. So that would be what I'd be calling. So given the international embarrassment created, you know, by the Speaker of the House of Commons, by allowing a former soldier of a Nazi military unit in World War II to attend and be recognized during the President of Ukraine's special address to Parliament on Friday, September 22nd, and that proper vetting was either not done or this individual's military record was ignored, that the committee dedicate, that the PROC committee hold hearings to look into this matter, and that the PROC committee hear witnesses to ensure that this never happens again, and they provide that they update their rules and regulations when it comes to vetting of guests attending, you know, a visitation of any foreign dignitary.
Yeah, and I apologize, I missed a bit of what you were saying. Like, just to be clear, we cannot direct, we can only suggest other committees.
So
I
the
missed-
preamble
but
at
I
the
missed
beginning,
the-
I would say
I
would
missed the
be,
verb of what you were.
yeah, that we recommend to the to PROC due to the rest of what I outlined, which is very similar to what Ms. Kuzi put forward. You know, we're talking about a few words.
Okay, Mr. Jenos?
Or just I want a point of order before I speak, and could I ask the clerk to read out the motion as she understands it, so that we're sure we're debating the same thing?
I would sincerely appreciate if Mr. Johns could just reiterate it. I could give you what I have, but it is, Mr. Johns moved that the committee, that the chair of the committee of OGO write to the committee chair of PROC to recommend that PROC study and alter the rules. So I would really appreciate some assistance filling in the blanks.
So the only changes I would make on Ms. Kuzi's motion is that, you know, the preamble is that we're writing to PROC and that we recommend that PROC given, and then keep the first part different. I would cross out liberal government and put by the Speaker of the House of Commons, because it was the Speaker, by allowing, and then the rest I would continue on as stated in Ms. Kuzi's motion. If I can read it, if you'd like.
Fortunately, we adjourned debate on that motion, so you can't.
This is writing a letter. So this is different motion because it's not on this motion. It's actually drafting a letter to PROC. So it's different than the motion, which is to have a study here. And it is very different. It's actually writing a letter recommending that PROC consider doing a study, given the international embarrassment, and the rest we could use. I would take out only a couple of lines different than Ms. Kuzi put forward in her preamble in terms of the recommendations around the letter. And I can't see it being, it's very different than what was just put forward in terms of the motion before was to do a study. This is a motion to write a letter to another committee, which should be allowable.
Chair, just a point of order. My suggestion, Mr. John says the floor and he has a right to move a motion, but it does seem that there's some uncertainty about the text of the motion. I don't want us to delay a lot of time, but I might suggest a 5-minute recess so that we can actually have the text and know what we're debating.
For 5 minutes. We'll suspend. Mr. Johns, if you want to start a game, please. Mr. Johns, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. And really like to see that we're trying to work together to get through this. Given the international embarrassment, I'm going to move a motion that given the international embarrassment created by the Speaker of the House by allowing a former soldier of a Nazi military unit in World War II to attend and be recognized during the President of Ukraine's special address to Parliament on Friday, September 22nd, and that proper vetting was either not done or this individual's military record was ignored, that the chair of OGO write to PROC to suggest they hold hearings to look into this matter and to ensure that there are safeguards in place so that this never happens again.
Alex, did everyone hear that okay? You had the wording correct?
I don't want to require be
Mr.
read out of
Gannett?
time, but can
Mr.
it,
Genos, yes, sir.
sorry, point of order. Can it be distributed in writing? Is that available or?
We don't
Oh.
have it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could it be read one more time? Then that should
Sure.
be,
How about if I have our clerk read it out?
'cause I will propose some amendments as well.
I'm just going to read a bit slowly so that the interpreters who don't have the text can keep up with me. Given the international embarrassment created by the Speaker of the House of Commons by allowing a former soldier of a Nazi military unit in World War II to attend and be recognized during the President of Ukraine's special address to Parliament on Friday, September 22nd, and that proper vetting was either not done or this individual's military record was ignored, that the chair of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates write to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs to suggest that they hold hearings to look into this matter to ensure that there are safeguards in place so that this never happens again. Is that correct, sir?
Mr. Genos?
Okay, so at a broad level, I do want to underline that I think it is somewhat absurd for our committee to decide not to study something and then to say that we're going to write to another committee to tell them what a great priority it is and great priority it should be for them, but we're not going to study it ourselves. I think I think I don't want to speculate on the motives of specific people, but I think the effect of sending this to PROC is that PROC will have to contend with the foreign interference issue and the privilege issue involving threats to Mr. Chong's family. That is also an urgent priority. We'll have to contend with how to balance multiple different matters, one of which it has been directed by the House to look at. And I also think it's clear from this motion that there is continually an effort to position this as a procedure and House and Speaker issue as opposed to a government operations issue. And that is about taking accountability away from the Prime Minister and the government who oversees security in the House. And again, to underline, like the standing orders don't apply when we have foreign visitors addressing the House. Members can go back and look at the record of how foreign visits come about. The House decides not to sit on that particular day. And the fact that the House is not sitting then allows an address by, in this case, President Zelensky, in other cases, other foreign leaders. But every time this has happened, it has not been a formal session of the House of Commons governed by the standing orders. If a member tried to raise a point of order during those proceedings, they would not be able to because the House is not sitting. There are senators, but also many members of the public that are on the floor during that time. So to suggest that this is a procedural issue and not a government operations issue, to suggest that all the fault belongs on the chosen scapegoat, I think is missing the point, and to suggest that we're solving this by sending a letter to another committee. That said, I do want this study to happen. I think the study is really important. So I guess we have to make a determination about whether to say this is better than nothing. But I would say it's not that far from nothing. But I'm going to propose I think a couple amendments to try to beef up the motion a little bit. So the first amendment I will propose is in the middle of the motion. It refers to suggesting that PROC study this. I'd like to amend it to suggest that they create a subcommittee to hold hearings. And then it would continue as otherwise. The creation of a subcommittee to do this work would allow the study to begin right away, and would spare PROC if they decide to go down this road of needing to determine whether to do this or foreign interference. I think members may say that's for them to decide, but since we're sending them a letter, right? I think we should provide that recommendation, and of course it's as non-binding as any other recommendation that would come from this committee, which underlines my sort of overall frustration with this method. But I will propose that amendment initially, which I think substantially improves the motion because it solves one problem with it. Thanks. Yeah, I have one or two other amendments that I've got to sort of flesh out, but I'll put this one on the table first.
Really quickly, the mandate for PROC, it cites that the Procedure and House Affairs Committee studies and reports on the rules and practices of the House and its committees, electoral matters, questions of privilege, MP conflicts of interest, internal administration of the House, and services and facilities for MPs. So this is their mandate. This is why I'm recommending it, is to make sure it goes to the right place. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't do this. I want this study, actually. I think that we're very supportive of getting to the bottom of this. We want accountability. In terms of the amendment, in terms of the subcommittee, I think I like the idea. And I think that if Mr. Jenius would consider just, if necessary, even before the subcommittee to expedite a study, something to that effect would be welcome, just because we want to demonstrate to PROC, obviously, that this is urgent. And if they don't have the capacity, a committee, that they create the subcommittee. So I support fully what he's doing with the sub amendment.
Are you moving an amendment to his amendment?
I hope
Or
it's a
asking for a
friendly. I hope it's a
Okay.
friendly.
I think Mr. Genuis had some other changes, so perhaps if he's fine with that, he can adopt that at the same time. But before we go to Mr. Genuis, Mr. Kuzmierczuk, you had your hand up? Were you talking Mr. Gord's?
Yes,
Mr.
thank you,
Jones?
Chair. I mean, there seems to be agreement on the floor here, but I would just urge caution that that we not direct PROC in terms of its internal deliberations. It understands this issue very well, understands the processes very well. I like Mr. John's original motion. It's very simple. It's very clear. It communicates very clearly the urgency of this and the importance of this matter to the OGO committee, but it allows their committee to determine on its own how best to proceed. So I would say that that the original motion that Mr. Johns put on the floor, I think it's crisp, it's clear, and it allows PROC to determine the how. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis.
Yeah, Chair, formally, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, but I'm comfortable with Mr. John's proposed sub-amendment, which I understood him to have moved. Of course, this motion empowers you to write the letter as you see fit, and I think the goal of the amendment and the sub-amendment is to capture the idea that that respecting the importance of the work they're doing on foreign interference, that consideration of a subcommittee would be a recommendation, and you can turn those two pieces into an appropriate letter.
Thank you, colleagues. We seem fine with that. Were your original comment was perhaps other? Are you?
The sub-amendment and the amendment now by unanimous consent?
I think we're fine with that, colleagues.
Okay.
See if we're fine with the sub-amendment to the amendment, which is, yeah.
If necessary.
I think it was if necessary, not if possible, if necessary, for the creation of the subcommittee, to write, to suggest, not to direct or give orders to. Mr. Kuzmierczak?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I do apologize. I thought we had agreement on that. My question to Mr. Johns as well too.
Are you, sorry to interrupt, are you commenting on the sub-amendment? Because we're hoping to see if we have an agreement to the
Sure.
sub-amendments.
No,
So we're
I'm
fine
not
with-
commenting on that. If you can come back to me after
I
that.
will. So we've accepted the sub-amendment. Mr. Janice, are you speaking on the sub-amendment?
Sub-amendment is accepted. I think we have accepted
I'm
the amendment
asking
as well.
that, but
Sorry,
before
yeah.
you can even continue, you've got your hand up before we even close the sub-amendment. So we're fine with the sub-amendment, colleagues. Perfect. Thank you. Now we're back. Are we fine with the amendment and everything? We're fine with that, colleagues? Perfect. So with everyone, Mr. Generous, go ahead.
Okay, so secondly, the language in our original motion said, given the international embarrassment created by the Liberal government, this was replaced in the proposed motion by Mr. John saying, given the international embarrassment created by the Speaker. I don't agree with his framing. I suspect he wouldn't agree with my framing. In the interest of consensus language, how about we amend it to say, given the international embarrassment created by allowing a former soldier of a Nazi. So essentially just taking out the giving of blame one way or the other. I think that just gets to something that we're all comfortable with.
Taking out by the Speaker, taking out by the government.
Yeah, just taking out by the Speaker. So it just reads, given the international embarrassment created by allowing a former. I think I don't think just trying to lay it at the Speaker's feet is accurate. But I'm not gonna propose what is obviously a minority view on who's responsible either. I think let's just, if we want to try to get to consensus, let's try to get there. So that's the amendment.
Mr. Kuzmierczak, so this is on Mr. Janice's just removing the word Speaker along with the original one, which was removing government.
Yeah, I disagree. I believe that Mr. Johns, again, I go back to his original intent and is including the fact that the words that it was caused by the Speaker, I believe, is the most accurate version of what transpired. And so I would prefer that we stick to that. But I do have one small amendment that I would like to propose as well. And I think it's a critical one.
Are you proposing a sub-amendment to Mr. Janice's amendment, or can we deal with Mr. Janice's amendment first and then you can propose your amendment?
We can deal with Mr. Genesis first, but I do hope, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, you come back to me.
I will consider your hand up. Does anyone else wish to speak on Mr. Janice's? And if you notice, every time I say Garnett's name, I pronounce his last name differently. So I hope you're all keeping track. I think I'm up to 9. Does anyone else wish to speak on Mr. Janice's amendment, which is basically removing Speaker and the original government? Mr. Johns?
I would prefer not to remove it, but if it's a pathway for us to getting through this, working collectively, I absolutely would support that because we need to work together here. And I think that is a way forward. And I think we need a pathway forward. We're sending a letter to PROC, let them figure out what they want to do in terms of how they want to conduct this study. But we're encouraging them to move quickly on this. And I think that's generally what we're trying to agree on here. And I appreciate Ms. Kuzi bringing this forward because this is
Yeah,
really
appreciate-
important issue.
I
And we need PROC
appreciate
to make
that
this an important
compromise,
issue.
Mr. Johns. Can we go to a vote on Mr. Genois's amendment, please, which is again just taking out the word speaker, which again modified the original motion, which was taking out government. Madame Vignola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chair. Just to be sure, we retrieve both speaker, juste pour être sûr, excusez-moi.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. So just to be sure, we're removing speaker and we're also removing liberal government. Is that correct?
Amendment took out government, then was proposed to put in speaker. This amendment would just take out speaker. So we will not have speaker or government. It will just say, given the embarrassment created by allowing a former soldier. Colleagues, can we go to a vote on that? Or fine on division? Okay. I
Right, recorded
assume-
vote.
Oh, we'll do a
vote,
recorded
Chair.
vote, sure. We'll just real quick record a vote, then I think we'll go to Mr. Kuzmierczak, please, after the vote. Madame?
Apologies, just labeling my vote correctly. We'll start with Mr. Jawari on the question
Oppose.
to remove the Speaker of the House of Commons from the vote.
Oppose.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Atwin? Opposed. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Kuzmierczak?
No.
Mr. Souza?
Oppose.
Thank you. Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Janice?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Madame Viola?
En accord.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That amendment,
Three, sir,
5-4, the amendment
Five.
passes.
that's 5 yeas and 5 nays.
Oh, I apologize. Not only can I not pronounce Mr. Genesis's name, I cannot count either. I will vote in favor.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
6-5.
6-5, I apologize. So the amendment passes. Mr. Kuzmierczak, I think, had an amendment. Then we will discuss that. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the origin, or excuse me, the first line of the sentence as it currently stands of the motion is given the embarrassment. I would also move an amendment to add the word, friendly amendment, given the hurt and the embarrassment. Because again, fundamentally, it's important. The people that were hurt by this, be it Jews, Poles, other victims of Nazi atrocities. I think that is our driver, that we prevent such hurt from being repeated again. I think it's important that we include that word.
Thank you, sir. So we'll be given the embarrassment and hurt created, or the created by
hurt and embarrassment.
hurt and embarrassment. Yeah, I see everyone in agreement. Thank you, Mr. Kuzmierczak. I appreciate that.
There's the word internet.
Yeah, hurt and international embarrassment.
Thank you.
International.
And I've got one more amendment, last one.
And we have hopefully the last amendment to this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is my last amendment. I'm going to propose that at the end of the motion, we add and report this motion to the House. The reason why I think that is important is we can send a letter to PROC, but a report to the House provides an opportunity for the House to pronounce itself on wanting this study to take place. And I think that that may be important to ensure it happens. We don't want this issue buried. We want the study to happen. And a report to the House provides the opportunity for the House to express itself on the matter. That's why I think it's important. And I hope that will be agreeable to members. Thanks.
Mr. Johns, on this amendment?
You know me, I think every report should go to the House. So eventually, so I think this should be something we should all support.
Colleagues, anyone else, or can we agree to this? Oh. Wonderful.
Oh, Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
can I ask for just a brief suspension, please, of the meeting?
5 minutes, fine? Mr.
Perfect, thank
Kuzmierczuk?
you.
Are you going to rush in 5 minutes? 5 minutes, colleagues.
Thank you.
Clarify the intent of your motion. My understanding is to report the motion to the House, not for PROC, but could you just clarify, please?
Chair, sorry, it does seem there's some confusion. My proposal was to amend the motion by adding the words "and report this motion to the House" to the end of the motion, which, if it's not clear, has the effect of reporting this motion to the House, not simply of requesting that a subsequent report be done by another committee. The reason I think this is important is because when a committee reports a matter to the House, it provides the House an opportunity to pronounce itself on that matter. So clearly this would be a stronger approach than simply writing a letter to PROC. It would involve writing a letter to the PROC, but also informing the House that we'd written a letter to PROC and providing the House with an opportunity to pronounce itself on it. Now, another option would be we could add in a request for a government response, which means effectively you cannot do concurrence for 4 months. So if people are concerned about it being used as sort of a dilatory tactic, which, you could simply adding in the request for a government response would address that concern. I think that a letter is not good enough, which is what I said at the beginning. And I think informing the House of this is an important step to actually working to get to the bottom of the matter.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johns?
I'm going to reiterate this is PROC's mandate, actually, to look at this. And so this is their job. And there's a reason why we don't have one giant committee, to cover everything. We have different mandates with different committees, and that's PROC's mandate. So, it's important that we send this letter. I think it's pretty clear we want them to do it with urgency. I don't want to see this turn into this letter tying up the House of Commons for hours on end, through concurrence, when we need. I think PROC's got the message. Like, this is a pretty clear message that our committee is saying, do your job. This is your job. This is your mandate. Do your job. So I won't support the amendment. I've supported your other 2 amendments, by the way, Mr. Jenius, and I think we need to get to the end here, and I'm hoping we can, because we're all supportive of the contents of the letter and what we're trying to do here and achieve. But I don't want this to become a tool of just like, something outside of the scope of our committee. Let's get this to PROC and highlight to PROC. We need them to take this on ASAP. And I really appreciate Mr. Jenny is saying if they don't have the capacity because of foreign interference, that they start creating subcommittees if necessary to take this on and move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I appreciate that. Can we move to perfect. Sounds like we can move to a vote on this sub-amendment. The recorded vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
On whether or not and report this motion to the House be added to the motion currently before the committee. Mr. Jawari.
Oppose?
Ms. Atwin. Opposed. Mr. Baines.
No.
Mr. Kazmierczyk.
No.
Mr. Souza.
No.
Ms. Block.
Yes.
Mr. Jennings,
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi,
In favor.
Madame Vignola.
Oh.
Mr. Johns.
No.
2, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 nays, 3 yays.
Okay, 7 yeas or 7 nays,
7 nays, 3
7
Did I say
A's,
that
3
backwards?
A's. So that is defeated. Can we go now to, oh, so we can go to vote on what we all had just agreed on. Go ahead, Mr. Sousa.
You know, I think all of us share the deep concern that what happened in the House. We all recognize that it's something that we should have been better aware to not have had that exposed. So I think we all in agreement with that. But there is a piece of the submission that I think needs to be tweaked, because I think we all recognize that we want to get down to what occurred and how it should not have been, how it should not have happened, and not presuppose that there's some blame or that somehow someone did something wrong. That's why we want it to be reviewed. And I would amend the portion where we're saying that it was ignored. That presupposes that it was known. And I would amend that portion of the text.
Sorry, just a point of order. So
Just, do you have different wording, Mr. Sousa, then? Because we can't just take out the word was ignored.
What
Because it would say, or this individual's military record was ignored. So
no, the prior to
proper
that,
vetting was either not done, or this individual's military record was ignored.
that presupposes the vetting. So you're vetting to make certain that the person was understood.
Sorry, but maybe I misheard. I thought you said you wanted to take out the ignored.
Take
part.
out who he was. So basically saying that there wasn't proper vetting, and then go from there and take out the portion of it that somehow we knew that he was a vet and that we purposely ignored his record, because you're presupposing that it was done. That's the issue that we're trying to
Says,
get at.
proper vetting was either not done on this individual's military record or that it was ignored. So they're saying either vetting wasn't done or that it was done and his record was ignored.
Correct.
So you want the entire line taken out
I
about the
say
vetting?
proper vetting wasn't done. I think that's the important piece here.
Okay,
Was
Uh,
something of either and
let's see.
not-
Yeah, we'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Jenos.
not either and
So during the President of Ukraine's special address to Parliament on Friday, and that the proper vetting was not done on this individual's military record.
On this individual, any individual, right? We again are presupposing that was there any others in the home? Like make certain.
And that proper vetting wasn't done, period?
or semicolon,
Keep
that
going.
the chair.
Oh, okay, semicolon, and then it goes into me writing. It was Mr. Generous and Mr. Johns.
okay, so I just I just don't see the problem with the existing language, because the existing language says that proper vetting was either not done or the individual's military record was ignored. In other words, either the research wasn't done or the research was done, but the results of that research were ignored. So the existing language, I think, is inclusive of all possibilities. It doesn't say his record was ignored. It said either the proper vetting wasn't done or his record was ignored. So I don't see the need for the change. I don't have a I mean it does seem like just sort of wordsmithing at this point, but I think the existing language is better.
I hear where Mr. Sosa is coming from. Look, we can all agree that there was no malice, intended here. This is a horrible, horrible mistake. And I think by removing, that this individual's military record was ignored, clearly, if anyone had identified this and connected the dots, this wouldn't happen. And if there was a proper vetting process in place, this never would have happened, which is the whole idea of the writing the letter to PROC, so that this never happens again and there's proper vetting in place and work to be done. So I would support Mr. Souza's motion. I'm hoping we can try to figure this out here because we're tying up the whole meeting on this, and it's important. I'm not saying it's not important. It really is. And again, I appreciate Ms. Kuzi bringing this motion here for us to really cement to PROC how important this is to all of us as members of Parliament and this committee. So I would support Mr. Souza's motion. I'm hoping we can all come to an agreement here to move things along.
I'm just going to have, Ms. Block, go ahead, and then I'm going to have our clerk just read what we think Mr. Souza has suggested.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it might be good for you to read that for me because what I think I heard is that we are going to keep in the letter that proper vetting wasn't done. And I think that is drawing a conclusion rather than leaving it open-ended, as my colleague Mr. Genuis has said. It's one or the other. They need to figure that out. I think Mr. Souza's motion or amendment is actually more limiting. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Block. I'm going to have, our clerk just read out what's Mr. Souza is proposing.
Sir, I
You can let us know if it's
do
correct.
believe the word either might need to come out as well in order to make it make sense. So if you would just have me, I'll read from Friday, September 22nd. So from Friday, September 22nd, and that proper vetting was not done, semicolon, that the chair of OGO write to PROC to suggest that they create a subcommittee, and it goes on from there with the language that has already been agreed to by the committee. So it would strike either, and then it would strike or this individual's military record was ignored, and it would be closeted by a semicolon.
Is that correct, Mr. Souza? That's correct. Okay. Anyone else, colleagues? We vote on Mr. Souza's amendment, please. On division. Mr. Jouari? Are you fine? Fine. Mr. Souza's amendment will pass on division. Are we clear on the final motion, or should the clerk read out what we think is the final amended motion? We're fine? Great. So the final amended and sub-amended motion. Can we vote on that? On division, colleagues? Wonderful. On division, we will do up a letter, and I will make sure everyone receives a copy. Thank you very much. Ms. Block, you were waving at me, then Mr. Johns or Ms. Vinola. I didn't see who was first. Let's go to Ms. Block first, and then let me know who was first of the two of you. Ms. Block?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I assume that this is the time in which we have opportunity to table motions that were circulated to our committee members as a result of the conversations that we had at subcommittee, that once we established an agenda dealing with the current studies that were ongoing, that we would then look to members to put motions on notice for future studies that they would like to see this committee undertake. And so with that, I would like to table a motion that was circulated to committee members on Tuesday. And look, in a recent announcement, the government announced that it was probing multiple companies that have allegedly been using Uyghur forced labor somewhere in their supply chain. These companies have allegedly been continuing to import goods which have used slave labor in their production process. And despite the international outcry and the condemnation from the Parliament of Canada, it seems that the Government of Canada has not taken the proper steps to ensure that goods produced using the products of forced labor are barred from entering the country. Additionally, members learned at recent hearings of this committee about government contracts with companies that engaged in unethical conduct but we're still allowed to obtain sole source contracts from the government and be cleared for